Hello, it's me again, your friendly neighborhood coding person who made some bubbles. So if you were watching some previous videos a while back, I made these bubble objects. And there they are. They're moving around the screen. And then there were some videos where I looked kind of different, which were about arrays, just like arrays of numbers and arrays of strings, and like it's a list of things and things have indices. So why am I here? Now I'm here in this video because I have this goal. I have this goal in life, which is to say I have defined what it means to be a bubble. I made a bubble class. I made a bubble object. And I made two bubble objects, bubble 1 and bubble 2. And I would like to be able to make 5 bubble objects. And I would like to not have to do this, because I would also like to make 500 or 1,000 or 10,000. I want to be able to make duplicate as many objects as I want, create as many objects as I want from that template, from that class, without having to have all these separate variables. And isn't it just so convenient that I'm right here, having just talked about objects and arrays, if I just put those two things together, we'll be in good shape. So let's do that. I don't think I need to, yeah, okay, so let's just do that. Oh, no, don't go over there. Okay, so I'm going to change this from two variables to a single variable called bubbles. Now, remember, when I want a variable to hold an array, a list of information, instead of making it equal to something like an object or a number, I set it equal to open, close brackets. There's other ways you can create an array also, but this is a pretty conventional way. Now what I might do is I might say, okay, I have this array. In theory, I have this array that I could fill. Why don't I put a bubble in index 0 and a bubble in index 1? So I'm going to put my bubble here and put my bubble here. I'm going to make two bubble objects. Instead of having separate variables, bubble 1, bubble 2, I'm going to have a variable, bubbles index 0, because remember the first spot in the array is 0, not 1. So it was kind of bad that when I was doing this I named them bubble 1 and bubble 2. I should have really named them bubble 0 and bubble 1. So the first thing I could do is just change this program to say like, hey, bubbles 0, bubbles 1, bubbles 0. This is bubbles 0. You get the idea, right? Bubbles 1. Oh, this is awful. Why am I even bothering with this? Bubbles 1. Oh, no, look at this. This is bubble 0 and 1, and this is bubble 0 and 1. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. No, wait a second. Stop the presses. I'm so confused. I think what I would prefer to do is move 0 and 1 and then show 0 and 1. So of course I could do this in any order, but I want to move the first one. And by the way, this is not going to be the solution, because even though this now works and I have the same exact result, the only thing that I've done differently is that instead of having two separate variables, I have one array, but I'm still referencing the two separate bubble objects individually. So if I want to have 10 of them, I still have to keep adding more and more lines of code. So what I want to do is I want to use that for loop. If I say for let I equals 0, I is less than some number, I plus plus, then inside here, I can refer to that array called bubbles. Instead of saying hard coding in 0, hard coding in 1, if I just say bubbles index I, this is going to repeat many times with a different value for I. I is 0, then it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. So this is a way of me iterating, accessing every single element of that array. So I can use that to, and by the way, I know, there's like a for each sort of thing. And maybe I'll make a video about that. But I'm going to just use a nice for loop with a counter variable. So I'm going to say for let I equal 0, I is less than 2, I plus plus. And now instead of referencing the bubbles individually, I'm going to just say bubbles index I, which means I can now do this. Bubbles index I, that same loop later in draw, this is to use a loop to create the bubble objects in setup. I can say bubbles index I dot move, bubbles index I dot I don't even remember anymore, show. Is that what it was? We could scroll down and look at the bubble class and see move and show. Okay, so those were the names of the functions that I used in that bubble class. So now, let's run this again. Oops. And here we go. So look at that. Now I still have two bubbles, but one was big and one was small before, and then one was, they were in different spots. I lost that. So one of the things that I had in my previous example, if I just go back to here, is I had specified exact locations for each bubble object and exact sizes. And now that I have a loop, I'm in a much happier place in that I can easily make 20 of these, but what do I do about initializing all that stuff? So the thing is here, hello, welcome to programming. The reason why I'm coding here is not because I want to specifically set some exact locations for bubbles. More likely, I want to come up with some kind of algorithm, like I want all the bubbles to appear in a perfect grid, or I want them all to appear randomly, or I want them to be in a grid that's slightly offset randomly, or I want them to appear in a spiral pattern, or I want them all to start in the same place. So what is that algorithm? So let me just say, so one thing I could do is I could use the fact that I have this counter I, and I could say let x equal, like, well, what if I start the bubbles starting on at like pixel 10 and then space them out by like 30 pixels? So this kind of came to me immediately because I've done this so many times, but this is now a formula that when I is 0, x will equal 10. When I is 1, x will equal 10 plus 30 times 1, 40. And if I ever got to 2, which it won't in this case, it would be 10 plus 30, 60, 70. Right? So this idea of spacing the bubbles out. So if I made 3 of them, and by the way, and then of course, instead of hard coding this value here, I could say x. I could use this variable to pass in, which is calculated dynamically. And then, by the way, this is really pretty bad. So one thing that's bad about this is now if I'm creating 3 bubbles all of a sudden, right, then I left this number 2 here. So what I want to do is say bubbles.length. So this way, however, now I can't use bubbles.length here because the array when I first started was empty. So I'm adding things to the array, a certain number of them, then I can retrieve that length later. And again, there are different ways you can approach how many spots there are and how you store the length, but this is just a way that I'm going to do it for this example. So now let's look at this. You can see, look at them, they started. Now let's not move them just so we can see. You can see there they are spaced out, and I could easily just say, well, actually, I want to space them out by 100 pixels, and I want them just to be 20 pixels, and you can see there we go, and I want them to actually start at least 20 pixels in, and you can see there they are, and then I want to have 10 of them, and there we go, but I can't really have 10 of them. You get the idea, and now I could put back in move, and there they go. So this is a way, and look, hello, did you notice something kind of exciting about this video, which is that I haven't once changed any of the code down here. The idea of a single bubble has remained exactly the same. The thing that's different now is that I can create them and put them in an array, and however many there are, I could just move and show all of them. So I'm going to show you a few more things here. Now, here's another thing I could do. Let's actually just make them, let's just sort of prove this point. Let's give them all random spots. And again, I could set them randomly in the constructor, but I'm just going to do it here. So I'm going to give them all a random, I'm going to just create a whole bunch of bubbles with random locations. And we can see in random sizes, and you can see there they are, but this is what I'm talking about. Now, I have this one program here. It makes 10 bubbles. I want this program to now make 100. How many keys on the keyboard do I need to hit in order to make this change? 1. If I've programmed everything correctly, all I need to do is add a 0 here, and suddenly I have 100 of them. And if I add another 0, suddenly I have 1,000 of them. Now, my program might be slowing down because it's drawing a lot of bubbles, and it's a lot to draw. And I could sort of start thinking about, well, what I really want to do here. Maybe actually what I want is for these bubbles not to have a stroke, but I want them to have a fill with quite a bit of alpha. And I could take this out of here, and now I've got this sort of like cloudy thing going on. So again, I can use this idea, and what I'm really doing here is I'm kind of on the way to building something called a particle system. I'm building a system of many individual elements that together make some sort of effect, like a smoky, cloudy thing. But I could just, with one variable now, with one value, change how many things are in there. Now, here's the thing. What if, I'm going to do one more thing in this video. And I'm going to actually put the bubble back to have that. So let's just go back to where I was with just start with 10 bubbles. 10 bubbles. Now, what if I take this out of setup entirely? It's gone. What's going to happen? What's my program going to do? Nothing. Emptiest. No emptiness. No bubbles. What if what I want to do is add bubbles when I click the mouse? Okay, let's think about this. The first thing that I might want to do is figure out where code executes when I click the mouse. So that is that I want to add function mouse pressed. Now, whoops, sorry. Now, what do I want to do? I want to make a bubble. Let b equals new bubble, and I want that bubble to be where the mouse is, and maybe it has a random size between 10 and 50 pixels. So and I don't love these one character variables, I should do better than that, but I've picked a random number and I've made a new bubble. What if I want to put that bubble in the array? Well, I could say something like bubbles index 0 equals b, right? I could say, the first spot in the array, put that bubble. And I click the mouse. Look, I only have one though, because what I'm doing here is every single time I'm making a new bubble and putting it in the first spot. But if this were a counter and it went up every single time, I could put the first bubble in the first spot, the next bubble in the second spot, the next bubble in the third spot. But I could do even better than that. There's actually a function. There are a lot of functions associated with arrays. Arrays are actually objects too that allow you to do certain things, and I'm going to get to them. I can delete stuff, I can move stuff around, I can shuffle, I can sort. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this function called push. Push is a function that means add something to the array. Push it to the array. And actually, by default, it's going to push it to the end of the array. So now that I have that, every time I click, I add a new bubble. And what's interesting about this is there's no limit to the number of bubbles I can have other than the computer's speed and memory. And interestingly enough, I might just, as a little effect, change this to mouse dragged. And you can see now when I drag the mouse, I'm kind of drawing this kind of array of bubble objects. Okay, so this is all about making an array of objects. So if you're following along, maybe you had an object you made, some variation of the bubble, you made a bouncing ball, you made some kind of flying pig, I don't know what it is you made, a rainbow, a heart. Take that, don't make any changes in your class at all. Try to write a program where you duplicate it in an array and you can just change one number and you can have 500 versus 1,000 versus 10. See if you can add them with clicking the mouse or hitting the keyboard or some type of maybe, what if you try to like add one every 10 seconds? How would you do that? What kind of event can trigger the adding of an object? And then what I want to do in a future video, which maybe will be the next one, is how could I delete these when I click on them? Or how do I even know? How do I communicate? Well, first of all, there's a couple things. How do I know if these bubbles are intersecting with each other? So I want objects to talk to other objects. And I also want to be able to talk to the objects. Bubbles, you, bubble, hello, bubble. That's me talking to the objects, I guess, but I don't have anything to say. Alexa, that's not, the bubble's name is not Alexa. Anyway, what was I talking about? So I want to be able to figure out how do I interact with the bubbles. Can each bubble have its own mouse pressed kind of like event? How does that work? So I got to get to that sort of stuff, and that'll come in a future video. Thanks for watching.